Welcome to the HFY Tales channel. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the story. Enjoy and take care. The vast hangar echoed with the hum of activity. A sea of humans, aliens, and cutting-edge technology swirling together in organized chaos. Lawrence stood at the edge of it all, his pulse quickening as he stared at the shuttle that would carry him into uncharted territory. For years he had dreamed of this, a chance to represent humanity in a meeting with the fabled Zarak, a warrior race known for their breathtaking beauty and unmatched strength. Today that dream was becoming a reality, and with it came the weight of a galaxy's expectations. Ready to make history? A familiar voice broke through his nerves. Mia, his closest friend, slid through the crowd, eyes sparkling with excitement. Lawrence forced a smile. More like ready to make a fool of myself. What if I stumble off the shuttle? Or worse, what if I insult them? Mia laughed, a sound that was both comforting and energizing. Don't overthink it, Lawrence. The Zarak are supposed to be incredible, yes, but they're also curious about us. Just be yourself, and don't worry about impressing them. Lawrence nodded, though his heart still raced. The stories he had heard about the Zarak, how their warriors could bring planets to their knees, and how their leaders were said to be more cunning than any human diplomat, played over in his mind. He gave Mia a quick, grateful hug before heading toward the shuttle that would take him into the unknown. As the countdown began and the shuttle doors sealed, Lawrence couldn't help but gaze out at the stars streaking past the windows. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. And yet, no amount of training could prepare him for what awaited him on the Zarak homeworld. The lush, emerald landscape of the Zarak homeworld unfolded beneath him as the shuttle descended through the atmosphere. The terrain was a blend of jagged cliffs, shimmering rivers, and forests so thick they looked like walls of green. But it wasn't the beauty of the planet that made his heart pound. It was the warriors waiting for him at the landing site. As Lawrence stepped onto the soft grass, the air hit him, heavy with the scent of alien flowers and something else. Something ancient and powerful. He barely had time to take it all in before the Zarak warriors approached. They were even more striking than the rumors had led him to believe. Tall, with bodies that seemed sculpted from stone, and eyes that glowed with an ethereal light. But one figure stood out among them, Kayla, the leader of the Zarak delegation. Her silver hair flowed like molten metal, and her violet eyes locked onto his with a force that nearly stopped his breath. There was no warm welcome, no small talk. Instead, she crossed her arms over her chest, her voice sharp but melodic. "Human," she said, her gaze narrowing, as if assessing his very soul. "You are here to prove that your species is worthy of an alliance. We have no time for weakness. Are you prepared to fight for your place among us?" Lawrence swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "I'm here to learn. I'm here to show that humanity can be more than you expect." Kayla raised a brow, clearly unimpressed. "We shall see." The Zarak training arena was not what Lawrence had expected. Instead of orderly drills or sparring matches, it was a whirlwind of chaos, warriors clashing with blades and energy weapons in fierce, brutal displays of combat. Lawrence's stomach twisted as he watched a particularly large Zarak lift his opponent off the ground and slam him into the dirt, a reminder that this was a race bred for war. "You're next," Kayla said, amusement flickering in her eyes as she tossed him a weapon, a long, sleek blade that pulsed with an unfamiliar energy. "Or did you think you were here to observe?" Lawrence fumbled with the weapon, barely catching it before it hit the ground. I thought there'd be some kind of orientation first." Kayla laughed, a sharp, mirthless sound. "This is your orientation, human. Show me what you've got." Heart pounding, Lawrence stepped into the arena, his hands shaking as he tried to mirror the warriors around him. But before he could even position himself properly, Kayla lunged at him with a speed that took his breath away. He barely managed to block her strike, the force of it sending him stumbling backward. "Focus," she barked, circling him like a predator. "You will never survive on instinct alone. You must feel the rhythm of battle, understand it before it consumes you." Lawrence gritted his teeth, trying to focus, but every time he moved, Kayla was faster, stronger, more precise. Sweat dripped down his face, his muscles burning with the effort of keeping up. "You're too rigid," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "Let go of your fear, or it will be your undoing." Finally, after what felt like hours, Kayla halted the session. Lawrence collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, while she watched him with an unreadable expression. "You're not completely hopeless," she said, offering him a hand, "but you have a long way to go." The next morning, Lawrence awoke to the sound of rhythmic chanting. It wasn't loud, but it seeped through the walls, vibrating through the floor, calling him to rise. He quickly dressed and stepped out into the open, greeted by the sight of dozens of Zarak warriors engaged in a communal training session. Their movements were precise, synchronized, and brutal. An effortless display of strength and discipline. At the center, Kayla led them, her body moving with lethal grace. Lawrence couldn't tear his eyes away. She wasn't just the leader of her people. She was their embodiment, strength, beauty, and honor wrapped in a single intimidating package. As he moved closer, Kayla caught his gaze and nodded. "Join us," she called out, her voice carrying easily over the noise. Lawrence hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the circle. The warriors eyed him warily but made room. His muscles still ached from yesterday's training, but he pushed himself into the same fluid motions, mimicking their movements as best he could. Kayla approached him during the exercise, correcting his stance with a firm touch. "You're improving," she said, her tone lacking its usual edge, "but you need to stop thinking like a diplomat. Combat isn't about negotiation. It's about control of your body, of your mind, of the space around you." "Easier said than done," Lawrence muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Kayla smirked. "For now, yes. But if you're to be part of this alliance, you need to learn. Diplomacy will not always save you." The session ended, and Lawrence lingered as the warriors dispersed, his mind buzzing with Kayla's words. For the first time, he realized that this mission was more than just a political endeavor. It was personal, and to succeed, he would have to prove himself in ways he hadn't anticipated. Later that evening, as Lawrence sat by the edge of the cliff overlooking the Zarak Valley, Kayla approached, her presence as commanding as ever. She sat beside him, the silence stretching between them as the stars blinked into existence overhead. "I want to understand more about you," Kayla said suddenly, catching Lawrence off guard. "Me?" He chuckled lightly. "There's not much to tell. I'm just a human trying to keep up." Kayla shook her head, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "You're more than that. You wouldn't be here if you weren't." Lawrence stared out at the valley, unsure of how to respond. His heart pounded, not from fear but from something else, an unfamiliar warmth that had been growing between them ever since their first meeting. "I guess I've always believed that diplomacy, talking things out, could fix most problems," he said quietly. "I never thought I'd be in the middle of a situation where words might not be enough." Kayla's gaze softened, the hardness in her eyes fading for a moment. "That's why we fight, Lawrence. Not because we enjoy it, but because sometimes it's the only way to protect what matters." Their eyes met, and in that instant, Lawrence felt the unspoken connection between them strengthen. It was more than attraction, something deeper, a mutual understanding forged in the fires of struggle. Kayla looked away first, her voice lowering. "Tomorrow we will face the council again. Zarak will not make it easy, but I believe in this alliance, and I believe in you." The next day, the council chamber buzzed with tension. Zarak stood at the head of the room, his eyes narrowing as Lawrence and Kayla entered together. The other council members were already seated, watching with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "Why should we trust a human?" Zarak's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "They are weak, fragile. They do not understand the ways of the Zarak." Lawrence felt his pulse quicken, but Kayla stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate respect. "Lawrence is not just a human," she said firmly. "He has trained with us, learned from us. He has earned his place here." Zarak scoffed. "Training with us for a few days does not make him one of us. We cannot trust an outsider with our future." Lawrence took a deep breath, stepping up beside Kayla. "I understand your concerns," he began, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "But this isn't just about me. It's about what we can accomplish together. Humanity may not be as strong as the Zarak in combat, but we have our own strengths, our creativity, our adaptability. Together, we can be stronger than we ever could apart. For a moment, the room was silent, the council members exchanging glances. Then Zarak spoke again, his tone dripping with disdain. Words, human. Words mean nothing here. If you wish to prove yourself, you must do it through action. Lawrence felt Kayla tense beside him, but before she could speak, he nodded. Then let me prove it. The council decreed that Lawrence would face a trial of honor, a test designed to challenge not just his physical abilities, but his resolve. He would have to face one of the Zarak's most skilled warriors in combat, not to the death, but until one could no longer fight. Lawrence stood in the arena, his heart pounding as the crowd gathered around the edges, watching with bated breath. Kayla stood on the sidelines, her expression unreadable, but Lawrence could sense the tension radiating from her. His opponent stepped forward. Zarak, a massive Zarak warrior known for his brutality in battle. He was nearly a foot taller than Lawrence, with muscles that looked like they could crush stone. Lawrence swallowed hard, gripping the weapon that had been handed to him, a traditional Zarak blade, sleek and deadly. He had trained, but he knew this fight would be unlike anything he had experienced before. Zarak wasted no time, lunging at Lawrence with a roar that echoed through the arena. Lawrence barely managed to block the strike, the force of it nearly knocking him off his feet. He stumbled, regaining his balance just in time to dodge another blow. The crowd watched in silence as the battle raged on. Zarak's strikes were fast and powerful, each one pushing Lawrence closer to the edge of defeat. But Lawrence refused to give in. He focused on Kayla's lessons, moving with precision, dodging where he could, blocking when he couldn't. Finally, Zarak overextended, and Lawrence saw his opportunity. He parried the attack, spinning to deliver a quick strike to Zarak's side. The larger warrior grunted, staggering back, but it wasn't enough to bring him down. Impressive, Zarak growled, wiping blood from his lip. But not enough. Lawrence's muscles burned, his vision blurring with exhaustion, but he refused to stop. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, the weight of the alliance resting on his shoulders. With one final burst of energy, he launched himself at Zarak, his blade clashing against the warriors in a flurry of strikes. Time seemed to slow as their blades locked, the sound of metal ringing in Lawrence's ears. He could feel his strength waning, but so could Zarak. In a last-ditch effort, Lawrence twisted his blade, disarming Zarak and sending him sprawling to the ground. The arena fell silent. Lawrence stood over Zarak, panting heavily, his body trembling with exhaustion. Then, slowly, Zarak rose to his feet and nodded in respect. "You have proven yourself," he said, his voice begrudging but sincere. The crowd erupted into applause, and Lawrence felt a surge of relief wash over him. He had done it. He had earned their respect. Though the trial of honor had ended in victory, not everyone was convinced. Zarak, ever the skeptic, continued to rally opposition in the shadows. Whispers of dissent spread through the ranks, and Lawrence could feel the tension growing with each passing day. Kayla stood by his side, her faith in the alliance unwavering, but even she couldn't ignore the brewing storm. As they walked through the city one evening, discussing the next steps for solidifying the alliance, they were ambushed by a group of masked militants, Zarak extremists who rejected the idea of working with humans. The attack was swift and brutal. Lawrence and Kayla fought side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized, but the militants were relentless. Just as Lawrence thought they might be overwhelmed, reinforcements arrived, driving the attackers back. In the aftermath, Kayla turned to Lawrence, her eyes dark with worry. "This is just the beginning," she said grimly. "Zarak may be behind this." Realizing that their alliance was more fragile than they had hoped, Lawrence and Kayla knew they had to act quickly. They gathered their most trusted allies and began planning a joint mission, a diplomatic outreach to the other Zarak tribes, hoping to secure their support before Zarak's influence could spread any further. The journey was long and fraught with danger. The extremists had grown bolder, launching attacks at every opportunity. But with each encounter, Lawrence and Kayla's bond grew stronger, their partnership becoming more than just a political necessity. The diplomatic mission had taken them deep into the heart of the Zarak territories. Every village they visited presented new challenges. Some tribes were open to the idea of unity with humans, while others scoffed at the very notion. The dissent that Zarak had sown was spreading faster than they had anticipated, and Lawrence began to wonder if they had enough time to win over the council before all-out war erupted. As they approached the last major tribe on their list, the air felt thick with tension. This tribe, led by the revered warrior Ralna, was known for its isolationism and fierce independence. Ralna herself was rumored to be as fierce as Kayla, but with none of her willingness to compromise. The atmosphere was icy when they arrived. Ralna's warriors eyed Lawrence with undisguised disdain as they were led to the tribal council hall, where the leader herself awaited them. Ralna was an imposing figure, tall and severe, her eyes cold and calculating as she sized up Lawrence and Kayla. "What brings you to my tribe?" Ralna's voice was low and measured. "Is it not enough that you ally with the humans? Must you drag the rest of us into your folly?" Kayla stepped forward, her tone respectful but firm. "We are stronger together, Ralna. The Zarak have always thrived on unity, and this is no different. Humanity brings new perspectives, new strengths that can bolster our own." Ralna's lips curled into a faint sneer. "Strength? From them?" She glanced at Lawrence with thinly veiled contempt. "All I see is a species clinging to the coattails of warriors they could never hope to match." Lawrence felt the familiar rush of frustration, but he bit his tongue. This was Kayla's fight to lead, and he trusted her to handle it. Still, the silence gnawed at him. "We've already seen what can happen when we fight side by side," Kayla continued. "Lawrence has proven himself on the battlefield, and so have the humans who are willing to stand with us. We cannot afford to be divided when greater threats loom." Ralna crossed her arms, her gaze hard. "And what makes you think those threats will not come from the very humans you wish to embrace? Trust is not something we give lightly, Kayla. You know that." Kayla met her gaze without flinching. "I'm not asking you to trust blindly, but I am asking you to give us a chance. We've fought for this alliance, and we will continue to fight for it. But we need the rest of the Zarak to stand with us." There was a long silence, during which Lawrence held his breath, waiting for Ralna's response. Finally, she spoke. "Very well," Ralna said, her tone grudging. "I will not oppose this alliance, for now. But know this, I will be watching, and if I see any sign of weakness, I will not hesitate to act." The mission had been a tentative success, but it wasn't enough to ease the growing tension. Zarak's influence continued to spread, and Lawrence could feel the weight of the impending conflict bearing down on them. He and Kayla had returned to the Zarak capital, preparing for the final council meeting that would determine the fate of the alliance. But the night before the meeting, disaster struck. Lawrence was woken by a sudden commotion outside his quarters. The sound of clashing blades and shouts filled the air, and he bolted upright, his heart pounding. He grabbed his weapon and rushed outside, where he was met with chaos. The capital was under attack. Kayla was already in the thick of it, her blade flashing in the moonlight as she cut down the attackers with brutal efficiency. Lawrence joined her, his muscles aching from exhaustion but fueled by the adrenaline coursing through him. "Who are they?" Lawrence shouted as he blocked a strike from one of the masked militants. "Extremists," Kayla replied, her voice tight with anger. "They finally made their move." The battle raged on through the night, the extremists targeting key structures and attempting to assassinate council members who supported the alliance. Lawrence and Kayla fought side by side, defending the council chambers and rallying the Zarak warriors to push back the attack. By dawn, the militants had been driven back, but the cost had been high. Several council members lay dead, and the capital was in ruins. Lawrence stood beside Kayla as they surveyed the aftermath, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that this was only the beginning. "We need to end this," Lawrence said quietly. "Zarak won't stop until he's torn everything apart." Kayla nodded, her expression grim. "We will, but we need to be smart about it." The council convened later that day, their numbers reduced but their resolve stronger than ever. It was clear that the extremists had been acting under Zarak's orders, and the time had come to confront him directly. Zarak arrived at the council chamber, flanked by his most loyal followers. his face set in a sneer as he took his place at the head of the room. "I see you survived the night," he said, his tone mocking. "Pity. I had hoped this would be over by now." Kayla stood, her voice ringing out clearly in the chamber. "Zarak, you've gone too far. The blood of our people is on your hands." Zarak laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Blood will always be spilled in the name of power, Kayla. You're just too naive to see it." Lawrence felt the tension crackling in the air, the council members watching in stunned silence as the two leaders faced off. "You claim to be fighting for the Zarak," Kayla said, her voice steady, "but all you've done is sow division and chaos. We could have been stronger together, but you've chosen to tear us apart." Zarak's sneer deepened. "Stronger? By aligning ourselves with humans? You're the one who has betrayed us, Kayla. You've weakened us with your delusions of peace." Lawrence stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "Peace is not a delusion, Zarak. It's the only way forward. The galaxy is changing, and if the Zarak don't change with it, you'll be left behind." Zarak's eyes flicked to Lawrence, his expression darkening. "You speak of change, human, but you know nothing of our ways. You do not belong here." "Maybe not," Lawrence said, meeting Zarak's gaze. "But I'm here, and I've proven that I'm willing to fight for this alliance. Can you say the same?" The room went silent. Then Zarak drew his blade, the metal gleaming in the dim light. "Enough talk," he snarled. "Let's settle this the old way." The challenge was clear. Lawrence knew what he had to do. The duel was swift and brutal. Zarak was a skilled warrior, his strikes fast and lethal. But Lawrence had learned from the best. Every lesson Kayla had taught him came rushing back as he fought, his body moving on instinct. The fight dragged on, both combatants pushing themselves to the edge of their limits. But in the end, it was Lawrence who prevailed. With a final, decisive strike, he disarmed Zarak and sent him crashing to the ground. The council chamber fell silent as Zarak lay defeated, his pride shattered. Lawrence stood over him, panting, his heart racing with the realization of what had just happened. Kayla stepped forward, her eyes locked on Zarak. "It's over." Zarak glared up at her, but there was no fight left in him. He had lost. The council, once divided, was now united. With Zarak's defeat, the extremists lost their leader, and the path to peace was finally clear. The alliance between humans and the Zarak was solidified in the days that followed. Lawrence and Kayla stood together as ambassadors of a new era, their bond stronger than ever. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but they faced it together, knowing that their unity had the power to reshape the future. As they gazed out at the stars, Kayla turned to Lawrence, a rare smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Lawrence nodded, his chest swelling with pride and hope. "And we've still got a long way to go. But we'll get there, together." The battle was over, and the weight of victory settled over the council chamber like a heavy fog. But it was a fog laced with hope. As Zarak was escorted out by the guards, the council members, once divided by fear and mistrust, began to rise from their seats, exchanging nods and murmurs of approval. The tension that had once threatened to tear the Zarak apart seemed to dissipate into the air, replaced by something new, a quiet understanding that change was not only necessary, but inevitable. Kayla stood beside Alex, her violet eyes scanning the room, taking in the atmosphere of cautious optimism. She had fought for this, harder than she had ever fought in any battle. And now, it was real. A future where humans and the Zarak could stand side by side, not as rivals, but as allies. Alex's heart still raced from the duel, but now it was more from the relief washing over him than from the adrenaline of battle. His gaze met Kayla's, and in her eyes, he saw not just the warrior who had pushed him to his limits, but the partner who had believed in him, even when he doubted himself. "We did it," he breathed, the enormity of the moment sinking in. Kayla nodded, her expression softening. "Yes, we did." The council room slowly emptied as the council members filed out to prepare for the formal ceremony that would solidify the alliance. Kayla and Alex remained behind, standing together in the aftermath of the long-fought struggle. The tension that had weighed so heavily on them for weeks seemed to melt away, leaving only the quiet peace of victory. I couldn't have done this without you, Alex said, his voice low but sincere. Kayla's lips curved into a small smile. You've come a long way since the day we met. You've earned your place here, Alex. There was a pause, the kind that lingered with unspoken words. Alex could feel the bond between them deepening, shifting from one of shared purpose to something more personal, something neither of them had fully acknowledged. Kayla, Alex began. But before he could continue, she reached out and took his hand, her touch both firm and gentle. I know, she said quietly, her gaze holding his. And I feel it too. For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of everything they had been through together settling around them. It wasn't just the battles, the training, or the diplomatic struggles. It was the connection they had built, forged in fire and trust.